So traditionally, you've got a database that sits on some side. Databases and getting them running is difficult. It requires a certain amount of, really kind of quite a lot of talent to kind of get that running. And working in SQL and managing databases at that level is difficult. On the other hand, with AI tools these days, working on code is much easier. The bridge between those two areas is object relational maps. So what an object relational map does is it will translate the SQL through to the code, and there's libraries around that be done. So you don't need to worry about the actual, this middle part is done for us. The bit that you then need to do is create the code. So what we'll be doing today, we won't actually be developing any SQL, even though we're going to be working with databases. We'll be working on the code side, and we'll sort of show you how that works today. In terms of tech stack, from a point of view of object relational maps, there's two types of technologies which I think are the ones that I prefer to use. So if your cup of tea is Python, SQL model is really great. The reason that SQL model is so good is that it's been built on top of SQLAlchemy. If you have had some experience in that, SQLAlchemy is basically you end up with a class. You'll see this in a minute. You end up with a class that sort of maps to the data fields, but it doesn't include validation. And SQL model has got pedantic built into it, so that when you're looking to validate the data, you've got a built-in validator, which is makes things an awful lot easier. If you don't have the validator built in, one of the downfalls of Python is that Python is it's not type. You can have any type that you want there, and it doesn't enforce types, and so it's easy to cast types in the wrong to the wrong area. So with pedantic, you can enforce it, and with SQL model, you end up with that typecasting built in. On the Node.js side, which is where I tend to do the front ends, there's a heavy use made of Prisma. Prisma is a really mature tool in terms of having an object relational map defined for databases. It enables you to manage migrations really well. It enables you to manage sort of linking between dev and prod databases. It gives you a nice clean interface to the data from within Node.js, and it's really kind of quite nice. We'll actually be looking at both of these today. Hopefully we'll get time, but we'll see how we go. But those are the two types of object relational maps that I would be recommending. Just one thing we're saying on SQL model is that is very new. So the version is I think 0.1 point something at the moment. The guys that have developed that are got a lot of experience in the industry, so they really know what they're doing, and they're built on top of using the knowledge there. Is relatively new though, so it's something which is, for me, it's tested it, and I'm comfortable that it's at a pretty stable state. But it's probably it's a new kid on the block. In terms of the tech stack for databases, today we'll be looking at developing with SQLite, nice and easy to develop with, great for prototyping, zero setup. For the we'll then hopefully get into Supabase. Now, the reason that I prefer Supabase for this sort of stuff is that it's got Postgres built in, the full backend suite. You have instant APIs, which is a really nice thing. So you've got RESTful APIs built into your database and GraphQL. Supabase has built-in vector embedding support. So if you're looking to do RAG, retrieval augmented generation, then you can do that. And it's got a whole lot of things to make it sort of suitable for production. Supabase is, you can get a couple of databases set up for free, and then you sort of start charging, but it's a minimal cost. Supabase is really popular in the development community. Firebase was the one which was kind of the incumbent, and Supabase has come along and is a lot cheaper, and it does basically the same thing. So it's kind of the one which is really popular. I really like it. I think it's great. So we'll be sort of interacting between SQLite and Superbase today. Now, this is the kind of the prompt side of things. So before we set up a program, we run through doing all this. We're going to skip some of the first steps today and just sort of focus on the data architect and the project planner. There will be a link at the end of this to where you can download all of the prompts that I'm about to show you. We'll just skim through them because it's in the link, and you can download it and sort of try it out. I do recommend that you use these prompts if you're looking to develop stuff. They make things an awful lot easier. And you can play with the prompts as well to kind of improve them. But the general flow is start with the product definition, define your UX, get your solution architecture in place, data architecture, sort of how data is structured and flows, and then project plan, the step-by-step plan. So each of these has a little bit of a description. Generally, cut and paste those in and sort of work through. We'll sort of skip over this and jump to the relevant ones, which is data architect. We just have a look into what we're looking to get done here. So data architect's tasked with designing a scalable, well-structured relational database schema that will serve both a Python backend using a SQL model and a Node.js backend using Prisma. Working closely with the product owner and solution architect, your job is to interpret that and develop something which is suitable. So he'll go through all this stuff, figure out what's needed, and then out of that we'll have a database design summary, key into these relationships, ideally an ER diagram, and then we'll sort of work through this. So that's the thing we're going to ask to come out from the data architect. From the project planner, we'll then be asking the project planner to take all of those inputs and to generate a project plan. The goal of that is to create a project plan which is into chunks so that the AI then can work through it in methodical chunks. Important thing in this is that if each line item should have a checkbox and be rated easy, medium, or complex, that's really helpful when you're running through doing these plans. You can sort of get a sense of the complexity of what you're looking at. And if something's super complex, then we tend to ask to break it down more so that the steps are quite clear. That gives the, this is how you'd run any project, but particularly in the case of AI, it gives it a sort of list of things to work through, and you can make sure that you're not trying to do too much at once, which is when you get into trouble. The output of all of these documents is in Markdown, and the reason that Markdown is the output is that's what AI LLMs digest really easily. So if you can structure data as in Markdown, it's very helpful for an LLM to actually execute it. So this is really interesting. Last week I came on and I said the best choice for coding is Claude Sonnet with a clear advantage. Now, a week ago, this was true. This week, the best choice at this point in time is Gemini 2.5. So it's incredible how fast this is moving, but Gemini 2.5 has full 10 points above Claude in the coding average there. And at this point in time, it's free. So I'll be releasing a video that sort of shows how to download this and get running with it. We will be using Claude 3.7 on this. I'm still kind of playing around with this, but it's pretty good from all accounts. Now, we covered this last time, and again, sort of start to provide a bit more information, but Bolt.new for their front end to get started. This is particularly for people that have no experience with code. It was, for me, it was a great spot to start because it's just such a low barrier. You can jump in there and start kind of coding straight away. We'll be focusing on Visual Studio today, but the other options that I would recommend, depending on your preference, is Cursor or Windsurf. Okay, so today we're going to develop some database for TacoQuest, a social app for rating and discovering tacos. I just did a prompt search before we started, and this said, give me a silly idea, and this is what came up. So I kind of like it. So we'll put that in and see what we come up with from a database point of view, and then build that out. But we should get the data structure around all this, and we will jump into coding time. So first step here is to define our SQL model, so we're going to start in Python, just to show you guys how it looks in Python. We'll generate some mock data, again in Python, and we'll use SQLite to start with to kind of test that that's okay. And then we'll try and write that to a Superbase database and then test that's okay. And then if we get that working, we'll jump into getting this running on Node.js. So I'll jump in now, sort of pause there if there's any questions people want to jump in with at this point in time. All good. Okay. So let's start by bringing in the ChatGPT here, and we want to come back to our prompts here. And we'll just ask it for this. Okay. Well, actually, first of all, we'll start by just put it on the screen. Okay, so let's zoom in a little bit. Okay, so we're building a taco quest. And then what we do is we put in here that you're an experienced data architect. Your role is to interpret the above. Create data some. Okay, we'll take this out. Data access patterns. We don't care about that so much. And then we'll give it the deliverables here. So let's see what we come up with at this stage. So now we've got a schema coming out, got an entity diagram coming through, and we've got the start of a SQL model coming through. Now this SQL model, what you've seen here is kind of cool, is that you've actually defined, it is a one-to-one mapping with SQL. So the relationships are defined. We've got primary keys, foreign keys, all that kind of stuff in there. If you read SQL, you'll be able to read that relatively comfortably. And we then also have it in Node.js. So we've got the two data structures. So that's great. So let's jump into here, and we'll create a docs folder. Just name in so you guys can see what I'm doing. And we'll make a file we'll call data. And post that in and have a quick look at the markdown that's come out of that. So here we've got we have our ER diagram in place. The beauty thing about this is that Markdown uses Mermaid to generate ER diagrams, so you can kind of get them together quite nicely. We can iterate and ask it to update this, and that will update over time. So we've got our diagram, we've got our Python model, we've got a Prisma schema, and at this point you might want to refine it, but I think that's pretty good. So what we'll do from here is jump back to this and say, this looks great. Well, actually, we'll take the prompt from the project planner. No, actually we won't, because that assumes we've got everything in place. Okay, so what we'll say is, okay, this is great. Please give me a detailed project management plan, a project implementation plan. Want you first of all to set up data SQL model and relate it to SQLite. Want a separate SQLite as separate files for database management. I want separate files for mock data creation. This is going to be data file. This one and the JS value. Be specific and mark each item, easy, medium, more complex. Place an empty checkbox next to each. Provide output in backend. Okay, now we'll get an implementation plan. We'll probably want to refine this a little bit. Let's see where we've got to. The goal is to implement the database structure using SQL model, set up SQLite, and create mock data for initial testing. Okay, so we modularize into the claim maintainable files. Okay, we've got a project structure, and this looks pretty good. Database models, initialization database, the seed data, and then the requirements. Okay, that's actually looking okay to me. So, so please export that to Markdown. Okay, so we've got a plan which is looking like it's going to be okay. We'll bring this plan into Visual Studio, and then we'll be able to use the coding tools from Visual Studio to actually code this up. So let's see what that looks like. So implementation, what's this plan? Okay. Yeah, looks like this is broken up though. Okay, a little bit. So let's just go ahead. Yeah. Okay, so it tried to be clever and sort of to input it in sort of code sections, but we just want one big document. So we'll get that. Still hasn't done it. Okay. Let's ask the AI in this side to clean it up then. So we'll bring this across to our so now this is our Copilot screen here. So in Visual Studio, for those of you that haven't used this, on the side window here, we have the kind of the code that we can see, the directory tree. In the middle part, we've got all of our the files that you open. And then across on the left-hand side is our Copilot. There's two modes to Copilot, which is kind of worth knowing in here. One is the chat mode that won't change your files, it won't edit stuff. And the other is this Copilot edit mode. And in order to have this Copilot edit mode know what it's working on, you need to pass it the files. So at this point, you can see down the bottom, it's only got the data, this data one. If I pass it in the plan as well, it's now got this as well. So when it goes to work on this, it'll work on both. And the other thing that's been done here is that we are able to select the model based on what we want to do. We'll go with the thinking model because we want to get this stuff set up right to start with. So the plan is a bit scrappy. Can you please clean up the data folder structure? And any other changes you think? We'll get that plan cleaned up, and then we can look at starting to implement the SQLite database. Thinking model takes a little while, but it is pretty quick. The other nice thing about Gemini that I really like is that it's super fast, like it's super fast. So when you're doing this kind of stuff, it's a notable difference to actually use Gemini. Gemini is not available in this at the moment. Okay, great. So now we've got a proper document structure. You'll see that Copilot has made the changes and we can keep or undo them. The red shows what was there, the green shows what has been replaced, and so you can go through and just like actually select or reject each option of that. So it's quite a good way of kind of getting this through. So let's keep that and have a quick look at the markdown that's come out of that. Let's see how we're looking now. Okay, we've got our structure. I broke it down a little bit more. We are going to set this up. And okay, so we're actually gonna at this stage we're gonna do some setup because I use UV as opposed to pip, but the reason for that is just it's faster. So let's just quickly set up the initial setup here and then be away. Okay, UV init, and then okay. Good. So this virtual environment is just means that you don't have to have all of these libraries installed across all of your directories. So by installing a virtual environment, you have only what you need for the program installed. When you study out in Python, you can install it globally and you can work with everything, but you'll end up installing everything and it just becomes a mess. So the best practice is to install a virtual environment each time you go in through stuff. And UV is the kind of choice in that. Once we've installed our virtual environments, then we need to install these dependencies here. So we're just going to install those. Maybe add, and this is a little bit different from the instructions the AI has given us. But that's cool. That's part of what we'll sort of put through in the instructions. What the AI has given will work, and it's kind of the standard one. This is just a little bit faster than doing it that way. Okay. So now we've set that up. We've done. We haven't done our git ignore, so we want to set that up because that will guide what gets checked into the code repository. So we'll ask this we'll say we have done all of phase one, apart from the git ignore file. And then we'll jump into the configuration of the database setup. And then this is where we'll just sort of leave the AI to do its job. So this, again, you could have followed exactly as it said, but it was just a little bit more useful to follow it this way. Okay, now we've got our git ignore file, which is looking good. And then we'll come back to our plan and with the plan starting with phase two. At this point, we'll start to see our code getting built out. And hopefully in the next 10 minutes or so, we'll get to a point we've got a SQLite database being built, and then we can sort of start to dive in and have a look at the data. I'm really optimistic that we'll get this up to the point where we can look at it in Superbase and a front end built in the time that we've got, but we'll see how we go. So let's look at what we've got here. We have the database is coming together here. We've got our model. This is our SQL model. So the SQL model has it's got the different set up there, and achievements, user achievements. That's looking pretty reasonable. Got a range of helper functions, and we'll ask it to write a README as well. So we've got some details of how all this actually fits. Okay. We don't need the requirements document, so we're handling that a different way. So we'll just say we don't need some UV. So please go on. Please go on and update and do the next tasks. Please also update the plan with what has been done and create a README. Update the README. This will get to a point where we've got a README. We can look through the instruction in terms of how to actually run this and get this up and running. We'll follow that along, and we'll have a look through the plan and see where the plan is at and see what's been built and what we need to, what's remaining out of what's been done. So this is the point where we're going to start actually then coming back and kind of testing things and seeing if what we're getting is what we want to get, which is sort of cool. So zoom back from there a little bit. You'll see as well, talking around the context window in here, that as adding stuff, it's adding bits and pieces to here. It's taken the requirements document out because it's kind of, I've told it you're using UV. It's adding the documents, and as it adds the documents, they're getting added to the list of files down here. So these files, as it adds them, it has access to all these files until you tell it that you don't want them anymore. What happens is, as you do this, your list of files that the program is managing gets bigger and bigger, and you get to a point where it's too big and you need to sort of say, we're done with that chunk of work, and then you sort of focus in on a smaller chunk of work. This is small enough right now that all the stuff can be kept in the context window of the LLM. So as it's putting this out, it knows everything of what it did before. So it's quite handy when it's small. There's a different kind of approach when stuff starts to get larger, but you need to be, you need good file structure so that you can load up, a subset of the project and work on that, because it can't know the entire code base as these things get large. Okay, let's see where we're getting to here. We're getting the README is still being generated. The plan here. We'll keep on belts. Just save this, and we'll have a look now at the. Might have made the README, and it did. Okay. So let's look at the README and see what we've got. Technology stack, project structure, getting started, claim the repo, set up the environments, install the variables, and then we need a env file to set everything up. So let's set up that environment file. And let's just have a look at what we've just done here. We have tacoquest.db is the file, debug is true, so that's what we're going to do. Now we want to actually start to run stuff and see if this is going to work. We're going to actually get some stuff out. So let's jump into here. Python. So let's take a close. Okay, so set up the database. We now have tacoquest DB there. Let's start database browser. We'll have a quick look at what we made and see if we. Okay, so we've got the data in there that we would expect. So that's looking good. What we want to do at this stage is probably add some more debug comments to that, and then get into phase 4, which is this seed data side of it here. And then we sort of start to get into the interesting stuff. So let's just have a quick look at the list, where we've got to. Okay. Okay, phase 1 done. Phase 2, database configured and set up, data modeling done. Okay, we're up to mock data generation now, which is great. So, okay, now let's do this mock data generation. Now, while this is happening, we're going to go and set up Supabase, and then we're going to try and write the data to Supabase, which is what we'll access from the front end when we're looking at doing it from there. So I'm going to leave that running, and we'll jump into Supabase here. And we'll actually go in, and then we'll do a new project. Oops. We'll call it Tucker Quest. Okay. Now that's then gone and made our projects. I'll be deleting this at the end, but let's just jump back into our environment file, and it's here we've got our database password. That's our project API key. That's and the secret. We need to figure out this one. Sure. The data professionals on the call, watching their head at this point in time as you're watching me do this. Okay, so we've got the okay, so the code has generated the examples, and let's then look at what's been generated. So we've got an argument to run a demo to show the database capabilities. That's quite nice. And we want an argument to, okay, so there's an argument here to seed the database, an argument to reset the database. Okay, so it's actually brought in some important capabilities there. So let's have a look at this. We'll do Python seed. Now, what we can see at this point is we just went through and seeded the database with some mock users, some mock locations, bunch of stuff. So we've actually got some data in there right now. So if we jump into the database browser at this point, we can actually run in and start to see that we've got this data here, which is great. So we've got some users in there. We've got some locations. It's been clever enough to figure out this is Minneapolis, so it's added some stuff in there. So that's looking pretty cool. And let's now just do a quick check where we do the same thing, but instead of seeing it, okay, it's thrown a demo, an error. So I'm not going to read that. I'm just going to chuck that in and say fix it. Actually, I'm going to stop that. I'm going to say fix this. Also update the plan, and then we'll get this plan updated as well. Because right now where we've got to is that we need to have a look at where this has actually got into. It's changing the plan as we speak. Okay, we'll review the plan now. We'll see how we're looking, and we'll see if we can get this in a more readable format as well. Okay, great. So database modeling done, mock data generation done, testing and validation, current focus. That's a little bit optimistic to say that we're done, but okay. Documentation, and what I now want to do is actually write this data to Superbase. So that's not included in the plan. So I'm going to ask it to update the plan. I want you to update the plan to include the task after stage 6, writing the data from the SQLAlchemy database to Sequelize. I want you to tell me the Superbase URL, IDs, etc. you will need. So I can put them in .env file. So now we're going to write this data to the Superbase, and at that point then we've kind of got to a point where we've got like a functional data in place. The reason that I am showing you both Python and JavaScript today on Node.js is that people tends to work in both. The Python stuff is super useful for the the data analytics, data analytics kind of type of folk that are shaping stuff up. And quite often what I find in the projects I work on is data gets shaped up to a certain point and then shoved into a database, and then there's a front end that sort of displays it. This is maybe not how you would work in practice, but it's kind of helpful to look at setting it up this way. Okay, we've got our database structures there, and it was added an argument to say show data capabilities. Okay, oops. Pressed undo instead of accept. And it also said what it needs from a data from the Superbase point of view. So it said here what it requires is the URL, the key, and the public key. So let's go back into our .env file at this point, and we'll just make sure we've got that set up. So we need our URL, which we have. It's not very helpful. Wait for that to to finish, and then we'll check getting our Superbase set up in place, and then we can actually jump in and test writing out to the database. Okay, so what it's saying here is create the project. Oops. Create the project, set the tables, do the migration connection module Superbase. So, okay, that's great. We'll grab all this and we'll bring this into our environment variables here. So what do we need is the URL, which is this one. We need the API key. Host for direct connection. So this will give us direct connection to that. We need the password in here. We need direct connection. And we are missing the public key at this point. So let's jump back into Superbase for a second. That's up. Okay. Okay, so that's the public key. What's the key? Cool. That should hopefully get us connected. So now we can go back to this and say, all the Superbase credentials set up in the .env file. He's got it. Okay. And the enable the Superbase connection to be tested. And really did that functionality. So what we're just doing there is asking it to go through and actually set up the bug functionality that we need. This is all obviously running through just that argument, that command line in the arguments. So okay. That will update shortly, and then in our plan we will be up to mostly through this project. We're going to have a very short amount of time to then get this kitten up on the front end. So hopefully we'll get some time to do that. I might pause at the end of this once we get it written into the database to ask some questions. I'd love to get it up on the front end because then you'll actually, like, it actually suddenly becomes to life at that point. This is all just sort of, in the weeds, making around with data. But the front end bit is the easy part. This is the hard part. And I've also taken a little bit of time to sort of explain a few things going through. So hopefully that's helped. But yeah, it's just as this is coming together. Are there any questions that people have at this point? Anything you want to kind of ask about what you've seen so far? No? Okay. Now the README has been updated, so we can have a quick look at the README. And what we can see here is that it's just about done. That's not working. Okay. keep everything that's been done, and then we'll run the main, function again. Okay, no module named Superbase. So we need to actually add these. Okay, and now it's getting some errors in here. So where did it get to? It was running some demonstrations showing what was there, and it's just got some type errors in there. So we'll fix those. And while we fix that, we'll have a look at what the demo function is actually doing. The demo function, we've got the ability to reset the database. It's quite helpful. Seed the database, set some users, do some demos, debug, test Superbase, migrate to Superbase. So that's what we want to get to the point of doing. So we'll run the demo. We'll then get that working. We'll test Superbase, and then we'll migrate the data across to them. So let's just quickly run through that. So we'll run that demo again. Okay, great. The demo ran through all okay. I do want to fix these errors though. They're just it's deprecated code, but they're just annoying. So let's just fix those errors. Okay, and then while that's happening, what we'll do is we'll run this and test the, what was the command again? Test Superbase. Okay, testing the connection, test failed, user does not exist, public user does not exist. Okay, so that is, if we have a look in here at our table editors, let's just jump into the projects. Request. We I'm not quite sure what's name on them. Ask what we need to do. So yes, okay. Let's try the migrate function for change. Test Sequelize. Just test. Let's see. Let's also add function scheme and migrating down. So what we're going to do now is run just a test on the connection, test that we actually can connect to that Superbase. Okay. Once that's tested, we know we can connect through, then we'll write the schema through, and then we'll write the data. So we'll kind of build it up as we go. But okay, we've had some changes to the code to get rid of those errors that were coming through. The debugging's been changed to only modify the connections, and then we've got some code coming in here to create the actual schema. So we're kind of coming together reasonably well here at this point, but there's a couple of kind of issues, which is what you'd normally expect. This is but at the end of this, we've actually got a reasonable documentation of what we've done. We've got like some working database, working code, and the bit that we're probably going to struggle to get time to do today is the front end stuff, but we'll see what we get to. Okay. So let's, okay, so test with the test Superbase, create the schema with that, and migrate with migrate Superbase. So great. So we'll get that working. Okay, connection successful. So that's happy times. Now let's see if we can create this. And I think it's going to give an issue here because I think we need to enable the public in the that's enable public users. We're not actually logged into it yet. Okay. So what this has said is that we're trying to run data in there direct, but we need to run this file in manually. So what we're going to do is okay. So you wouldn't normally do this. That's okay. It's only if it shows. Okay. Cool. Now we've got our tables there, and at this point in time, if we have a look at tables in Superbase, we should see our tables there now. So we've actually got the data going through, and now we want to migrate the data. Migrate to Superbase. Oops. Okay. So now we've got our data. That was our demo data across in Superbase. And now we can go on and create the view of this in the front end, which is sort of the next step of this. So that kind of marks the first chunk of this work, where we've gone and made some data. We've got it into a database. We haven't followed best practice in terms of security by any means, but we actually have the data in. Let's have a quick look at the actual database. So we've got got some data in here. It's looking as we would expect. We've got the different setups there. And we've actually got this data in here you can see now. So that's pretty cool where it's got to. Okay. At this point in time, we're going to now try and create a Node.js front end to match this. So now what we're going to do is go back a level and make a, normally you would split the back end and the front end out a little bit, but we've got, probably worth taking a moment to reflect on where we've got to here first. We've got our a program set up with not overly complex data, but we've got some code running that now runs that through the database. We can run that on SQLite for testing purposes, and we can run it onto a production grade database for development purposes, or for developing an actual application. Typically, you would stay in the SQLite for a while you're doing all this sort of stuff. Although it's not too long before you'd sort of look to move it across to something a little bit more full featured. So we've got the data in there, we've got it set up, kind of giving what we want. We are probably going to need to play with the data structure as kind of more information comes to light. So you just be like, I actually need to add in different features to make it work. But that's where you might spend a bit more time up front on the design side of things. So let's jump into here now, and we will try and okay, we'll make a file called source. Okay. Now we want to make a Node.js application that is the front end to this data, and which sits in source folder. this should be a React application. Wants you to use Prisma as demo. This should match what was done in Sequelize. This may or may not work. We'll see how we go, but we're actually now going to create the second type of object relational map, this time using Python, using Node.js. And we'll make it so that these two are equivalent, which means that we can write into the database from Python and read out from Node.js, and the data that sits in the middle is the kind of the common part. As I said before, Prisma is great because it Prisma enables a whole stack of different types of database functions like migrations. You can actually evolve your database over time using Prisma, and then the SQL model, there's also ways to actually manage your data as it goes through iterations. So working across these two schemas is possible, although it is a little tricky, to be honest. Okay, we've got some codes coming together. We're going to need to jump into source at this point and do an npm install, get it up and running. And it's the package JSON file is corrupted, is what that's saying. So let's just run that. I hadn't saved it, was the issue. Okay, so we've just created a very, very simple structure in here of our front end. What you can see here is it's got this Prisma code here, and the Prisma code is what we're interested in. So the Prisma code is you've got the schema that's in Prisma. And let's have a look at this schema, because you'll see that this is, again, from a database point of view, is quite a nice kind of description of the data. So we've got user, location, taco, review, follow achievement, user achievement. So it matches what we had from the Python side. And what that means is that when this program is writing to the database, it will be using this schema, which under the hood could then be writing SQL to the database. But we don't access the SQL direct from here. We access the Prisma code. So we are up and running at that point. And let's just see what we get on the output. Yeah. Okay, bring that up, and we've got our interface, and surprise, we get an error of some sort, and this data is not getterable. Okay. Okay, and let's have a look at the errors that we're getting. Let's go through. We're pretty close now, though. We've actually got a front end that knows about the structure of the data. The bit that we're missing is actually then getting that connection working. So what we've built in this 50 minutes has been a database structure just off a concept. We've done that in Python. We've got some kind of tools that let us develop that and make that work. And we then have created a front end that knows about that. And then the front end we can program to interact with data in different ways. But now we'll sort of see if we can get that problem fixed. Need to install a couple of things. We'll run it again, see how we go. Okay, and we're actually not getting the errors anymore, but we're also not getting the data coming through. So, yeah, not getting errors anymore, but no data is coming through. Please add in debug statements, test the database connection, and display the result in concept. So where we've got to, the database, the front end is running. It's then going to look for the data and it's failing and it's not giving us any information back. So we need to kind of know if we are going to connect into the database. So we'll just do that quickly now and see if we're actually linking in. And if we are, then great. Then if not, then we'll go back and sort of see what the deal is. Okay. We got a no response. Sometimes this just does that. Imagine people hammering the LLMs all the time to try and get information out. So we'll just run the whole thing again. Same thing. So we'll switch models. Sometimes this stuff happens, and the beauty about having different models is that they're all passed the same information from these different files. So you can actually just switch models, and you don't lose anything because it's not like it's built up a memory of what it's doing. The memory is passed through each time that you kind of run in a command. You'll also see here, I was talking before about the number of files being built up over time. So you can see here we've got all these files now that are built up. And when this gets to a point where there's more files than it can handle, one of these will start to turn like a color, which is clearly a warning. And that's the issue there is that you've started to build up too much. But right now, this is fine. We can actually pass all of this data through, and it's perfectly okay. It actually runs that. So we're adding some database structure. We'll run for another 5 minutes to see if we can solve this, 10 minutes, and then we'll jump back into questions because I'm just mindful that we're out of time otherwise. Okay, now we'll load this up. Let's see what happens. You're still not getting that data coming through. Okay, and then we're getting 404 error. This might be as simple as needing to make all the databases public. Let's just do that. We'll just do that from the scenes. Jump into sorry, just let me take a second. Okay. And then hopefully that should solve the problem. We'll see how we go. All of this sort of information I'm going through here now, as I said, I'll put the video up at the end, and then I'm going to go through and break it out into chunks so that you guys can work this through, so that there's not one big kind of lump of me just sitting here going through stuff. The benefit of having this kind of live coding session is that it shows you that it can be done in real time, and so it shows you how, when you come up against problems, the approach to sort of try and solve them. It is expected, obviously, that you kind of run into these sorts of things. So this is not unusual. and each time it's sort of slightly different what problems you get up. What's quite helpful then is we're still not doing that, so haven't succeeded in this case of getting it up and running, which is sort of what we wanted to do, but that's okay. We'll stop there and jump back into the code itself. We did still get a reasonable chunk of the way, and I will, after this, I'll finish getting that running, and then that will sort of be posted the view of this thing running so that you guys can see what it looks like at the end of the whole process. It probably is like 10 minutes or so off from getting it up and running. So just before we finish that, let's just do one quick look at the messages coming back from here and just see if it's, yeah, okay. I'll get that working, and so it worked when I tried it before, so it won't be too much to solve. Okay, let's jump back into the presentation now. And so where did we get to? We wanted to define the SQL model, which we did. We generated mock data. We wrote to a SQL database, and that was good. We wrote to a Superbase database, and that was okay. We set up the Prisma model. We weren't able to read and write to the Superbase database, so I'll fix it up. And then once that's been done, then there's a question of kind of what that interface looks like. So we didn't quite get as far as we wanted, but we got most of the way there. If you want to get access to these documents that I used during this process to generate the prompts, there's a slightly enhanced version that's available from the download link that I'll give you in a second. In the slides, I put like a limited version of the download link because otherwise they end up sort of too dense. So what you get from the download link is a little bit more full-featured. That will give you the ability to generate the product requirements description, the user interface description, the solution architecture guide, implementation guide, and the data architecture guide. And then the key one in this, from my point of view, is that implementation plan. It sort of really helps. This is the link here to that those prompts. I'll chuck it in the chat. Feel free to jump on there and grab that. I'll also chuck the YouTube link in there. You'll see on the YouTube that there's on the channel that there's one other video on there at the moment. It's a similar one to this, and as I said, what will be coming up will be videos that are more divided up into chunk-sized pieces. But right now, it's just one big kind of lump of demonstration. A couple of people have tried to follow along with the videos, and generally there's a lot going on that there's sort of like, I don't quite know what's happening, or you were doing some stuff so fast I didn't follow it. Feel free to reach out to me on Discord and with questions and say, I didn't understand what happened. Could you take me through stuff? And I'll can usually jump on and solve things for you fairly quick. The part of all this, of course, is that I'm keen to develop this into some course materials so people have got some sort of step-by-step guides to work through. And so what I'm looking for is volunteers. So if you are liking what you see and you're sort of thinking, I'd like to contribute and help this community grow, feel free to reach out to me and let me know. What will happen in that case is that you'll get early access to the course materials. You might have a project you're looking to advance. It will help you advance your project, and you'll get a shout out on the website. The community website is still in its early days, but you'll see a whole list of functions that are advertised on there. What I'm looking for at this stage is people to kind of basically go through the instructions and be like, this is what you told me to do, and then we broke it down into more detail, and now I know how to go and actually implement what was done. So yeah, so feel free to contact me. That's the kind of way to give back. And that sort of concludes the session. I will, as I said, go back and actually get that working. So it's we've got our Taco Quest front end actually interfacing to stuff. But what I wanted to do now is just spend a few minutes getting a bit of feedback and seeing if you guys think this was useful or questions you might have going forward. And I'm sorry if I missed anything in the chat. Generally, on these calls, if you have questions and you chuck it in the chat, I'll respond to that if I sort of glance across and see stuff coming in. But as I said, feel free as well to jump in and ask questions as we go. So yeah, any questions you guys have got? Anything you thought, like in terms of feedback, was it helpful, interesting, clear, unclear? What would be the general kind of view of what was presented just now? Everyone stayed on the call, so that's a good sign. Okay, well, if there was stuff that wasn't clear, feel free to let me know. I one of the key things about this is to make sure that what's presented is useful for people, and I can always slow things down or spend more time going into things, but I need the feedback to kind of know where to focus efforts. So don't feel shy about reaching out. Would love to kind of hear from you. Rama, so you said it's interesting, which is good. Future sessions, as I said, I am open to the idea of if someone wants a particular thing developed, we could use that as an example. And at the end, you would get, something that you're looking to do, be advanced a little bit. So feel free to let me know if you've got some ideas you want to actually run. And then just coming back to the upcoming sessions, we have got the front end is coming up next week, and then we'll be back into. Actually, don't know what. I think that's probably. I think that's the API one. I'm not sure. I need to check that. But we'll spend the next week looking at the sort of front end side of things in a bit more detail again. And then probably sometime in May there'll be a hackathon which people can come together and actually code up in real life. Doing that in real life is super helpful because we spend the day going through stuff. People can ask questions. We put little teams together. The teams kind of go through and code some stuff up, and it's just hands-on. You learn so much doing it that way. And then there's sort of support through the day doing that. So that's a nice way to sort of solidify some of the learnings. Just in terms of, again, a quick idea, this is covered this last week very briefly, but in terms of the tool sets that's used, there's obviously like a vast amount of tool sets that's here. We focused on database today, so I use Supabase for the reasons that I pointed out. In the future sessions, we'll be looking at different aspects of this going through. But again, if there's areas that you want to focus on, then let me know. Also, going through this sort of stuff, developing a product or a piece of software that does stuff, get a long way with these tools, but there's still specific areas that you need to dive into in more detail. We've done sort of front-end, back-end database. That leaves an awful lot of areas to kind of look at. And yeah, open to suggestions as to what's helpful to follow for people. What I probably I think becomes useful is things like user authentication, for example, is a topic which is always interesting. So it's an area where Supabase is quite good as well. AI agents is going to be coming up, talking around how to get an AI agent talking to a front end, which is easier than you might first think if you've kind of know the approaches. And then how to go through the different sort of payment processing, for example. So setting up a Stripe account to access to be accessed by your front end can be a key part of any sort of product, obviously. So there's a few areas that can be looking at, but yeah, that's sort of where it's at. And then just to finish up, there is this site now, which I'll just jump to. And this is where the sort of the business side of this comes in. So the community side is calls like this to help people get up to speed. The business side is we've got this community, and then there's a course coming up. Let me know if you want to jump on that course. That will be really diving into the details of stuff. For businesses that want mentorship on how to use AI in their businesses, this setup. It's a sort of a typically runs for a few months, taking people through how that looks, and then of course running actual projects. So that's the business side. The community side, if we jump into this here, you'll see the community website, and the current link in here is taking you through all of the different coding labs that's here.